welcome everyone. Let's wait for about 1 or 2 minutes for more people to enter the room. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Sling and I'm the conference producer with Informa Connect Singapore. So today we'll be presenting the webinar on healthcare automation, challenges and opportunities, as presented by both Ms. Catherine Kalako, who is the Senior Director of Industry Strategy and Marketing for Life Sciences, as well as Dr. Yin Chow, who is the Global Healthcare Industry Leader. So this webinar is being supported by Automation Anywhere, who is a developer of intelligent automation platform which employs software bots to complete processes. And this webinar is hosted as part of our 6th Asia Healthcare Week event, which is happening from 2nd to 4th of September 2020, which will be delivered digitally. So as my colleague was sent a link over to the chat, which you guys can access to learn more about the conference. The session will be ongoing for about an hour, with both Catherine and Dr. presenting for about 35 minutes, followed by 20-25 minutes of Q&A. So before I hand over the time to them, allow me to go through some admin matters with you guys. So kindly direct your questions by clicking the Q&A button that you can find at the bottom panel of the screen. Because of the limited time that we have for Q&A, so feel free to upvote the questions that you'd like us to address first, and we'll get to them first when we get to the Q&A session. And lastly, the webinar recording will be sent to your email within 2 to 3 working days after this webinar. So without further ado, let me hand over the time to Catherine. Catherine, please. All right, Catherine, I think you're on mute.
Hello, let's try that again.
Yeah, works now.
Thank you very much. See, it's wonderful to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with your audience. We are responsible for leading life sciences and healthcare worldwide. And in today's session, we want you to actually have come out of this with one actionable item. The intention is to share with you the knowledge that we're bringing from around the world to discuss current industry trends and actually review some of the use cases that we've seen around the world to help us respond to the current crisis. We know that life sciences and healthcare companies are at the forefront and are leading the response. We appreciate all of you, and we hope that you are well and safe. It is important for us to work together, and all of us are needed in order to respond to this, to assure global economic and personal health for all. What's really interesting about what's going on right now is how government, healthcare, and life science industries are really working together at an unprecedented pace. And what we've actually been able to realize is that intelligent automation empowers this active collaboration. Now more than ever, real-time analysis and AI-driven decision-making are needed to, in fact, find the right solutions and also be able to manage what's going on in the industry at the moment. So things like data sharing and gathering, scaling organizational capabilities, and enabling smart supply chain. Now, what is going to happen is the world will never be the same. IDC has reported that every time there's a pandemic or a global shock, things change forever. So the idea is that we are going to need to deploy intelligent automation to enable digital transformation. And the IDC has reported that these are the top trends for life sciences. The future of life sciences is truly digital transformation. We are seeing companies around the world up-level their projects to be a strategic and corporate level across all business units. In addition to that, we understand that you are working on finding a vaccine or a therapeutic that works to assure that tests and treatments are in supply. We're looking to accelerate clinical trials. We want to reduce friction and automate regulatory processes and communications. And one of the biggest areas around the world is really optimizing supply chain and removing bottlenecks associated with being able to assure medical supplies, raw materials, and key drugs. As soon as the therapeutics and vaccines are being discovered and approved, we're going to see the need to scale manufacturing as quick as possible and also to assure manufacturing for the critical drugs that are in scarce supply. And we obviously want to monitor what's going on. So I'm just going to touch a brief bit on what's happening now. So as we move through the different phases, we're now in the phases of thinking about business continuity. How can we manage the new normal? And we're seeing impacts across workforce, across the business in terms of it getting intelligence around what's going on, the ability to scale the solutions, and also building out capacity within the organization. We need to move people into higher value work and create capacity within the organization to both manage the shock to the system, manage the healthcare demands, and also manage the ability to develop and release new therapeutics. Now, how many of you are aware of what intelligent automation is? I would imagine some of you know a little bit about RPA or heard about it. We're not going to go into great depth about this, but if you'd like, please connect with us and we'd be happy to go through it in greater detail and show you a lot of the demonstrations that we've been able to implement with other life sciences and healthcare companies. So think of automation as operating as a person operates. So if you have to log into SAP to get information out and then enter it into your quality management system and then pull information from SharePoint or a Word document, all of that can be automated as if it was a person doing it. So it enables the integration of legacy systems, and it also enables you to get rid of those manual, mundane tasks that your people are doing in order to move them to higher value, or provide them with more operational insights and business insights. So it's really, discovering processes that can be automated, understanding the structured data like a fax or a PDF, being able to read that in, being able to manage tasks and also monitor those. It's highly secure, and it also completely auditable. People use this for everything from lab data to marketing data to finance. And what's really important about the time that we're in is that really we need human and digital workers to work side by side to create amazing things. Innovation comes out of these types of global crises. And how can we deploy digital workers to help with process automation to eliminate errors and move us into higher value, less automated tasks? And this is not something that is new. We are seeing across all sectors a 20% increase in revenues, a 50% increase in customer experience. And this is exceptionally important in the virtual world that we're moving into now, and also being able to track and engage patients. We have 30% cost savings. We've seen up to 80 to 90% cost savings associated with being able to automate processes. And also what's very important about this is there's a faster time to implementation. You get the ROI is in less than 12 months, and you're able to get higher accuracy, increased productivity, and faster cycle times. So it is a tool to actually, and a platform that enables you to deal with this crisis to create more capacity in your organization. So we're going to walk through some of these use cases associated with where we're seeing rapid response and critical processes that are being addressed now more than ever. So across the value chain, discovery processes, clinical and regulatory, operations, patient, and health professionals. Dr. Jan is on board to talk and provide you with deep dive into healthcare areas, and I'm going to touch on some of the life sciences and medical device and pharma. So we're seeing companies that are using automation to help them find and discover a suitable drug candidate, using AI and integrating data from multiple sources and enable that collaboration to find proper compounds. Also being able to integrate data from multiple sources that you might have to do manually. We have one company that has a huge spreadsheet related to managing data across the world, and they're having to manually update that. So what we're able to do is provide some automation of much of it to reduce it in more than half, so people can actually focus on making decisions around that data. We also see people doing enabling patient recruitment and management, integration of research report, and I'm going to go through a lot of the operations areas in some of my use cases. So hopefully some of these resonate with you. If you have any questions about that, please note that in our Q&A section. So drug discovery, within the regulatory documentation process, there's a huge amount of very required prescribed documents and processes. So we have worked with 85% of the top pharma and medical device companies worldwide within their automation platform, but also within the response to COVID. Many of them are actually using automation to enable regulatory forms, both preclinical and clinical, to pull the information from multiple sources. In addition to that, they actually will monitor the regulatory database and responses to be able to act quickly if they receive a response from the regulatory body and be able to have the right person act on it right away. So for example, one pharmaceutical company was able to increase or decrease their speed and increase their time to market by 4 months. They are able to do that by automating their NDA process, as well as a CRO or clinical research organization was able to use automation with one of their partners to complete the audit of the entire process. So the documentation is started by the CRO, and then the bots will navigate through it and read through it to assure that it's in the right font, it has the right format, and the right units of measure and dosages are consistent within the organization. It then pulls information from a lab tests and research center and combines that information, it checks the format and fonts to finalize. So it's a series of bots that does this for you, and it is able to reduce 33% amount of the workload associated with auditing these documents. Some of the more complex automation includes integration with AI and being able to work with partners that are able to read medical terminology, and then you can actually use it to use in concert with RPA to separate out the PII information from the actual data, and then use that data for either training your AI itself or being able to use to create insights. Then that information is processed again through automation. So we're not only are we using it within clinical trials, we're also using it to create the protocol documents to enable that they're consistent units of measure, the protocols and all the details are the same across thousands of documents. So this is an opportunity for us to create practical AI and be able to realize the potential of both of these now during this need of being able to find the right vaccine, the right candidate, and assure medical supplies. Also fun things like being able to do research and market analysis. This is used a lot with both generics and also pharma companies who want to keep tabs on the latest publications or information. And so the bot will actually log into websites, do keyword searches, pull the information out into a spreadsheet and create a report. We're seeing a lot of companies use this for being able to do report generation and provide real-time information and dashboards to executives and to their operations teams. So sometimes it may not be as easy to adopt in, say, these complex processes. You might want to look at areas where you're seeing a lot of manual burden or increased workload associated with the current conditions, or you want to be able to assure more business continuity by creating more cost efficient production of your operations. So look at areas like finance and accounting. We're seeing a huge amount of IT work with people enabling their help desk teams to work remotely by being able to manage things like passwords and onboarding and offboarding. In HR, a huge amount of work is being done virtually, including everything from talent acquisition to onboarding and offboarding people to enabling communications and also education of the workforce now that there may be a remote. This also works for things like reporting compliance, global payroll, and other areas within HR. I'm going to cover a few things with regard to customer care, call center management, pharmacovigilance, complaint handling, support calls from health professionals and others. Huge amount of volume increase worldwide, and we're enabling those contact centers to help manage that workload and being able to provide the service and support people are looking for. In addition to that, obviously, we've talked about supply chain operations, and we'll cover some of those now. So this is a use case. We have one medical device and medical supplies company that saw an overnight increase of orders for their medical supplies by 5 times. They went from 1,000 orders to 5,000 orders a day. It was not physically possible for them to process that. It was just humanly couldn't do it. So they were very pleased that they actually had these bots in place and were able to take on board that surge of orders and be able to supply worldwide enough inventory for people, for the distributors, to enable them to keep continuity of those key medical supplies. Not only that, but they were able to create bots that parsed out the supply to assure everyone got a little bit. So one supplier, one distributor wouldn't take everything. It allowed the individuals to separate that out. Another key part of this is also being able to share inventory, and we worked with on some pilot projects to evaluate how to share inventory across hospital systems or create more visibility for the supplies companies to enable them to predict surge in certain areas and be able to readjust their forecast based on what was happening. So in this particular case, the distributor would send the fax or they would get an email from or a spreadsheet from their sales reps. That information would be scanned. It would be the information would be would parse out the key fields, about 5 of them that it needed to place that order, and then it would actually enter into SAP, complete that order process, and then send a communication to the agent or the distributor, notifying them that the order had been completed and when the ship and arrival date is. On the other side of that, we see use cases where drug companies and medical are also tracking the purchase order and the delivery dates to assure continuity of raw materials. So they want to assure that they actually receive the goods and the materials they need in order to create the drugs for the market. And with the closed plants and the border issues, those delivery dates are shifting all the time. So they're using automation to help with that. And at a recent conference on COVID sponsored by Informa, the #1 item that they identified that the industry needed to deal with besides digital transformation was an agile supply chain. As part of business continuity, they needed to become more agile and they have the ability to shift and manage these crises. So you want to be able to do that proactively to enable your business to be able to manage through these shocks. And as we know, the companies that were more digital were able to sustain longer and survive through these conditions. Now, we've done a lot of work on supply chain automation, incorporating AI. We talked a lot about tracking POs and being able to track the documentation, et cetera. So looking at this entire process and really focusing mainly now on the middle section, but of course, there are many other areas that we can automate. And I'm also going to touch briefly on business continuity with regard to customer service. Jan will build a little bit more on this from the hospital side. What we've seen is that call volumes have increased, and so what we want to be able to do is help basically triage or manage those increased email requests, and also enter information into their customer records or their CRM system, customer relationship management, want to validate customer requests and access emails, extract data from multiple places. So this bot will receive an email request from a customer. It logs in to collect the account and transaction history and product or household data from multiple systems. So all of that information is curated for the agent, so that has that at its fingertips, and it doesn't need to go to multiple systems to get that information. It also can transfer and confirm balances in accounts, and it also can complete and update it in the IT tracking system. So what this does is allow account transfers in near real time. It eliminates waiting time for clients. It reduces the cycle time by up to 80%, and basically made happier people. And that's what we really want to achieve right now. So part of that is to enable this is on Salesforce Service Cloud, enable the Salesforce to be the window pane to the entire operations needed to provide satisfaction to that client, patient, or health professional. And that is done through being able to incorporate the bots right within that window. And actually, these are pre-built and available and help to be able to supply new parts or information to that individual. And we are working on new areas with regard to enabling telemedicine and also patient engagement and patient services to automate and basically up-level the ability for that to be done efficiently. We also have a rapid response team that can build bots in days. We're currently working on a couple of supply chain management solutions and some other areas associated with executive reporting. The ones that we've completed include clinical record form process automation for the WHO, and also being able to do workforce health status management that was actually done in this region. Many of these were done in this region to enable you to know and be able to manage people coming back to work and know if they're healthy and if they're okay and they need anything. So I'm just going to conclude with the ability for how you can transform. You can start with pilots. We work with you or with your partners, where you are able to go simply from 5 to maybe 50 bots a year to over 370 bots a year through a very known process. As I mentioned, 85% of the largest companies worldwide for life sciences use our product and our technology, so you benefit from that knowledge. And also we bring those best practices to you to enable your success both now and into the long term. So I'll pause there and hand it over to Jan. So Jan, you want to take it from here? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Catherine. Great presentation. Hi, everybody. Good morning, I should say. It's a pleasure to speak with you. What I'll do is I want to cover some of the use cases that healthcare organizations have been interested in with COVID-19. Here you see a typical epidemic curve with a number of new cases over time. It shows the involvement of healthcare providers from the rise in the curve all the way through the peak, the population recovery and business recovery. Payers will be involved a little bit later during the recovery. Automation can actually play a pretty big role in both population and business recovery, particularly as we're finding that COVID-19 has jump-started digital transformation at many companies that were planning to do that. Next slide. In an epidemic and other disaster scenarios, one common use case is the central emergency command center that you see here. You can see from the diagram that the command center has many functions. And of course, for natural disasters, disaster scenarios, many hospitals already have plans in place to do command center. These functions mostly have to do with collecting information, making decisions based on that information, and coordinating with other organizations on mutual aid, especially care delivery and allocation of resources. One of the big issues we had in the US, for instance, and in many countries with the crisis. So in a situation where resources are constrained and need to be shared, connecting decision makers will be critical. So what intelligent automation can do is actually automate a lot of the processes so that the information sharing is much more real time, such as infection control protocols, tracking inventory and resources, managing staffing, public health updates, analyzing data to try to predict demand, coordinating mutual aid agreements, and so on and so forth. So a lot of the sort of the mundane work, the repetitive work can be taken out so that the command center can actually act much quicker and much more quickly and much more timely basis. Next slide. In this use case, this is an example of a government reporting form that needs to be submitted when a healthcare provider suspects or confirms a COVID-19 patient. In a crisis, you can imagine that the doctors and nurses will be very preoccupied, very busy, and therefore they may not fill out this form on a timely basis. Therefore, public health authorities will not get timely updates. What a software robot can do in this situation, it can activate the form. And we actually had one customer very interested in this use case where you can fill out the form with data from the electronic health record and other hospital systems, either partly or fully. So you extract the data from different systems, structure the data as a CSV file, and insert the data into the form. And that way the staff can come up with a form that's either partly or fully filled out, and the form can be submitted much more quickly and much more timely. Next slide. In this use case, it involves applying for government funding to help sort of subsidize the excess costs incurred by healthcare systems due to COVID-19. And this is a program that's been happening in several countries. So the challenge is when you submit a claim for funding for COVID-19 costs, hospitals need to document which of their costs are due to COVID-19. And this is a challenge because many times during a crisis, it may not be possible to formally document which cases have COVID-19 or a mix of COVID-19 and other conditions and so on. So what an automation system can do is scan information systems for diagnoses, for medications, for treatments, staffing, and even temporary facility construction costs due to COVID-19. And these kind of this kind of data collection can actually help a hospital put together, I would say, the log of what happened with COVID-19 and submit that as a claim for reimbursement. Next slide, please. Okay, this is yeah, next slide. Okay, next slide. I think we're going back and forth. Okay, that was it, expediting patient admissions, the last one. Okay, so COVID-19, of course, has caused an upsurge in hospital demand and the use of much more resources than anticipated. One area that it has caused a huge crisis is actually in the process of patient admissions, patient triage, and patient admissions. So how do you handle that? How do you expedite patient triage, patient admissions? I know some hospitals even have constructed entirely separate facilities just to have patients with the same condition be together, so they don't have to isolate every patient. So in this situation, what software bot can do is in the event of an upsurge in demand, you can speed up the intake process by automating things like pre-registration, triage, orders, bed assignment, reserving needed supplies. As you know, COVID-19 patients, as you may know, require isolation, require, in fact, a special kind of isolation called airflow isolation. They require certain kind of equipment. They require staff PPE and other kinds of measures. And the bots can actually track inventory and keep track of this to the point where, if needed, they can activate, let's say, a contingency plan. Bots can also alert the lab, the pharmacy, the radiology department, and also the staffing function so that you can get enough staff to, the right kind of staff to take care of patients. And so you can increase the throughput while you can free up the staff to do what they need to do. Next slide. A related question is, how do you deal with a hospitalized, highly infectious patient? And in some sense, this is not very different than other times, but there are unique situation, unique characteristics having to do with the fact that you have so many patients. You've probably seen videos of hospitals overwhelmed with patients in the hallway. This slide shows some of the processes that could be automated during hospitalization of a COVID-19 patient. With an increased patient census, you definitely want to free up the staff because they will be in short supply. So what you can do is you can automate the intake protocols. Go back, please. Automate the intake protocols, protocol-driven orders. You can do inventory management, patient monitoring and alerts, even schedule follow-up and visits and tests and services, and coordinate with the command center. So in other words, you can actually automate a lot of the collaboration and connection that needs to happen when you have a large-scale crisis. Next slide, please. Here's a slide about the contact center in the midst of COVID-19. The contact center, of course, will be very busy. It usually is very busy, but on top of that, we're seeing about a 25+% increase in business because it must not only handle the regular calls, but perform additional functions beyond that. It may need to ramp up by hiring more workers who are required to work from home. Automation can ease that setup as well and drive many of the communications and coordination needs with new employees. In a contact center situation, automation can help keep that contact center in touch with the command center, as well as with public health departments and other kinds of authorities. You can automate coordination with other mutual aid entities and link to providers of essential consumer services in the community, and therefore keeping the command center and the contact center updated. There is one interesting situation here I like to point out, which is in terms of escalation of a contact center call, we do have a feature or ability in our software to do something called human bot collaboration, where we have specifically designed the ability to manage teams of bots and teams of people to work together. And so, for instance, if a caller were to call into the contact center agent and that problem that the caller had was not easily solvable, the contact agent can have a way to escalate that inquiry and to trigger responsible agents, other supervisors and so on, so that they can react in time and get the solution for the caller as soon as possible. This is something that's a pretty new function, but in terms of contact center, I think it's very useful and in other situations as well. Next slide, please. For healthcare providers, there have been 4 categories of use case that have been seen. First is the upsurge in demand, both in inquiries and in COVID-19 patients. And as I mentioned, automation can help triage, help accelerate admissions, gather information, and augment contact centers. Second is a need for a connected command center that functions as a center for information gathering, decision-making, collaboration, and coordination. Third is medical management of hospitalized COVID-19 patients. And finally, the crisis has highlighted the shortcomings of the healthcare supply chain with shortages in PPE, as you know, ventilators, isolation facilities, and medical staff. Automation can track the supply of the supply chain by gathering data from suppliers and leveraging predictive analytics, as well as launch contingency plans as needed. Next slide, please. For payers, these are the key considerations: increased demand, managing costs, worker shortages, and business impact from the economic disruption. You can see some of the use cases in these categories, and part of it remains to be seen, because to be honest, we are still in the midst of COVID-19 and there may be additional waves of infection. So the economic impact and the impact to payers, to government bodies that fund healthcare, may take a new turn. That is, there'll need to be new subsidies, new funding, and actually redesign of the new normal. Next slide. So the question is, what is the new normal? As we recover to a new normal from COVID-19, it's hard to answer completely until we know a lot more about the virus, but COVID-19 has clearly forced a lot of us to think about digital transformation. So for healthcare providers, there are at least 4 pillars, I would say, of the new normal. The first is telemedicine, and this has been a very interesting area. Many around the world, there have been many historical barriers, especially in the US, to to make telemedicine hard to implement as a mainstream technology. Yet in the last 3 months, we've overcome the barriers of the last 30 years. And so I think telemedicine, from all I can tell, is going to be part of the new normal. There'll be more virtual care, more telemedicine, more remote sensing, faster networks, more sophisticated measurement with physiologic sensors that are coming out, including sensors that can sense sepsis, that can sense breathing, can sense heart rate, blood pressure, even your emotion. Things like that are going to be catapulted by this crisis. And in fact, I think from this point on, a lot more people are going to be more willing to take up remote care, both from the provider and patient side, because it does, one of the advantages, of course, it does reduce face-to-face contact. The second area is interoperability. This is really highlighted by this crisis. We've had a lack of interoperability between different systems, both within organizations and between organizations. And because of that, you get confusion about information, about what's happening with the epidemic, what medications are required or recommended by public health, the inventory levels across different systems, and many other things. And of course, interoperability, as we've known for a long time, is critical for population health and also for individual patient safety and quality of care. The information flow is critical. And that's something that actually automation can help out with as well, because a platform in automation can reach into different systems and create sort of the dashboard across them that you can look at and make decisions based on. The third area is scalability. Healthcare is fragmented generally, uncoordinated, and structurally very difficult to scale. One solution is to automate as much of healthcare as possible, because automated processes can be easily and quickly scaled either up or down, which is very difficult to do if those processes normally would have to have people involved. So you can hire and you can let them go as you need it, but if you can automate that process, the scalability is much higher. So in a high demand scenario, human workers should be hired to do the work that only humans can do. Scalability means resiliency, it means flexibility. And so that's actually going to be part of the new normal, I believe, for healthcare. And finally, the last column is supply chain. That's been a big issue around the world. It was a perfect storm because the supplies were coming from the Far East, from Asia, from China, and of course with COVID-19 that sort of shut down. So in this situation with supply chain, I think the new normal will include automation of the collection of data across the supply chain to give early predictions on potential disruption. Bots can also automate the onboarding of alternate suppliers and handle backup supply chains that I think are going to be regional or local in the new normal. So a lot of things to think about. Like I said, partly it's hard to predict because we still have an ongoing developing story. But I think that these are some of the things that we'll have to start really considering in order to deal with this in the future. Next slide. To summarize, the new normal is for healthcare providers, telemedicine, and automation of part of that, interoperability, scalability, supply chain, and for healthcare payers, telework will become accepted. And because of the uncertainty I mentioned, it will require organizations to be very agile, very scalable. And those things actually favor automation. Business models will need to be very adaptive, very innovative. Next slide. This is one example of the potential return on investment from automation. It's something that Catherine mentioned before. This case study is from the National Health Service in the UK. The NHS wanted to maximize the time that their workers spend with patients, that is, spend in the front office, by reducing the electronic paperwork that they had to do, the administrative, sort of repetitive things that computers can do better. So they implemented a center of excellence to drive transformation of their system through automation. And you can see the results. It's pretty impressive. I mean, besides increasing the job satisfaction of their workers, they were able to save 4,000 hours of repetitive work per year on a 24/7 basis, decreasing data entry time by 95%. And that, who would not love that? And resulting in 100% accuracy. It's interesting with accuracy that it's about a 5 to 10% error rate for most careful tasks that human beings have to do. So the issue with that, of course, is having to go back and fix the errors. So this is really a big advance on both fronts. Next slide, please. Automation Anywhere is, to summarize, is the global leader in RPA and pioneer of the digital workforce. And as you can see, the major, most important analyst firms has designated Automation Anywhere as the global enterprise leader across the board. We have 1,500 partners worldwide, over 4,000 enterprise customers, large enterprise customers, 2.1 million digital workers deployed. That's the latest figure. And we're in over 90 countries with very good branch offices and representation. So we are actually a global company, very excited about the future and the ability of automation and intelligent automation specifically to bring us as human beings into the 21st century. So it's a very exciting time. I hope you'll join us on this journey. Next slide, please. This is the last slide, and I just want to reiterate the key messages, and they are that digital transformation strategic priority includes creating organizational capacity and scalability, number one. Number two, AI and intelligent automation solutions are the key to supporting life sciences and healthcare industries in order to meet our ongoing global challenges today and in the future. And finally, focus should be on business continuity and on agile operations. And I think this is the new normal. So back to you, Siying.
Okay, thank you both for a wonderful presentation. So just a quick reminder to our attendees to direct the questions by clicking the Q&A button that you can find at the bottom panel of the screen. So we have a number of questions in the pipelines. So one that's receiving quite a number of votes is the first question. Few of the submission requires CAPTCHA to be validated. So how can this be taken care of?
It depends on what you're looking at. What we'll do is monitor the actual email box that comes in. Sometimes a person actually has to get around the CAPTCHA. It depends on what it is, and we'd be happy to talk to you about how we work with that to assure both security, that it actually is identified, and also ways of being able to automate. So.
Right, okay. The other question is, what are the low-lying fruits or easier start points where we begin the journey for automation?
So when you think about what processes you should start with, and realize that when you first start, you're actually learning. So you want to pick a process that is well understood. That is, it doesn't change a lot, but yet it's done a lot so that you get a lot of return. And so you can learn how to automate the process if it's simple, repetitive, tedious, generates a lot of errors, requires a lot of time to do. It's well documented, and it doesn't require a lot of human intervention. So it's a simple process from that point of view to automate. And so you learn from those processes, and as you learn, you start to look at more complex processes, things that have dependencies and require other things to be done, and that's how you go. And in fact, one of the indicators of success is actually having a center of excellence. That is having a core group of people that can shepherd this automation platform. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Yan. And this is a question from someone from the Canberra Hospital. What are the medical legal implications of this technology?
Right. The automation platform, the intelligent automated platform, can be viewed as a software tool that organizations can use to improve performance and outcomes. So in a sense, it's like using Microsoft Office or Salesforce, which some people use for healthcare. The automation company helps the customer organization design and implement the solution, but it really is up to the healthcare organization to make sure it meets all the regulatory requirements that apply. The vendor usually does not see or touch patient data once the automation takes place, has been implemented. So there is not an associated regulatory burden required of a software vendor. Now, if the software vendor were to process patient data, that's a different issue, like some vendors do. But in our case, in this industry, we don't. We provide the tool, help you design the solution, implement it, but it's really up to the healthcare organization to maintain the compliance.
Also, just to add to that, most of our companies are using it within regulated environments, and because we have the highest level of security and we enable many of the processes and work with their compliance organizations, we're able to support and also assure security. And in some cases, it's more secure because a person's not in the loop. And also you can track and audit every step the bot is doing. And so therefore it provides more assurance. And we have a lot of information about the security and privacy issues and security of our system on our website. But it is one of our top priorities is to assure the information and data is kept secure.
Right, so in terms of the medical legal requirement, even though we're not required, our platform is actually so secure that it makes it easy for a healthcare organization to be compliant. And
right.
I think that's a good summary. Yeah.
Exactly. makes their job easier.
Yep.
And on the technicalities of automation, what is involved in implementing automation, and how can I start if I do not have any resources available?
Yeah, this is one where you probably do, we make it as easy as possible. There's a lot of different ways to start. As Jan said, you want to start with something that's highly structured and has a process associated with it. That's why people often start in things like IT or finance or reporting. And you also can start with us, we work with you, or you can work with a partner. Often people will have one of our partners help them get started and then also help them scale. So there's lots of different options, and we work with you to get what you need in order to be successful in the first 3 months and then for the long term.
Also, I'd like to add that if you really are resource constrained, we do have a community edition that you can download for free. You can start learning, you can start experimenting. We have courses online with Automation Anywhere University that you can take and even get certified in. So there's lots of ways to get started, like Catherine said, but cost need not be a barrier.
Right, exactly. Agree.
Right. And next question, how effective can telemedicine be when there's no personal care involved?
That's an interesting question. Actually, the studies have shown that probably 60 to 70% of physician visits by patients do not require the patient to be touched. So in other words, it's discussion, it's reassurance, it's confirmation, things like that. So for the 30 to 40% that do need to be touched, the question is, how can you replace that using technology? And I would say in the past, probably 5-10 years ago, it was probably not possible. But today, because of technology, it is possible to take over a lot of the things that are done in person. Now, the question is, the other question is, will patients accept it? Will providers accept it? And I think with COVID-19, they have been sort of kickstarted, I'd say, to accept it. And what we're finding is that a lot of physicians who were very against telemedicine in the past have found that it's actually quite efficient. Patients like it because they don't have to come in and be exposed to other patients. Providers find themselves very efficient. For instance, if you have a telemedicine schedule, of patients to see, and a patient does not show, which is very common, you can actually go to a waiting list, and because there's no travel time, you can immediately bring another patient in. That's very efficient, as opposed to having an empty slot that you're sitting around. So there are a lot of things like that that telemedicine can offer. Of course, the question is, does it replace the human relationship, the doctor-patient relationship? I don't think it can, and I think in most cases, patients and doctors need to meet at least in the beginning. But once that trust is established, it can actually be very functional for that relationship. Yeah.
There's a question from KPJ Healthcare, which is a Malaysian healthcare provider. What is the right and cost-effective approach for a healthcare organization which has many hospitals and has piecemeal implementation on technology to further execute digital transformation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think to digital transformation means different things to different people, but it basically involves the redesign, re-engineering of a healthcare organization to bring the operating model from the 19th century, essentially, to the 21st century. So it's a model that can leverage technology and new business thinking and processes and partnerships and things like that to improve performance, efficiency, cost savings, flexibility, scalability, all the things that you need in today's world. But because it involves a wholesale rethinking of an organization's DNA, the best way to do it is actually as a unified organization. It's hard to do digital transformation for part of an organization because then you won't fit. You won't fit with the rest of the organization. So what does that mean? You need to have buy-in from all the stakeholders. And that's the hard part. But once you can do that, things will move very quickly. So change will cost you time and will cost you money, but it's part of the process that will hopefully result in a much better organization.
There's a related question. So someone is asking about, processes are not perfect across the supply chain. So like adding on to what you say, are there any suggestions as to how to fast track automation implementation considering these pain points?
Yeah, that's a good question, because often that's why you use automation, because you can, in fact, automate and take advantage of the digital transformation by automating processes you want to update, right? And so you can, in fact, do the same work a person does using a bot for most of it, and then be able to upgrade or automate or improve the processes going forward. So there's two different ways of doing it. One is you can do some process improvement to begin with and automate that, or you can automate your legacy system, be able to take advantage of it being automated while you actually move to a different platform or update it from there. We see a lot of people doing the latter because they need the ability to automate those processes now rather than waiting. So they can, and then they can redeploy the bots to do something else. So you have that flexibility and agility already built in by implementing intelligent automation.
Within the supply chain, what are the best areas for automation, like high impact use cases?
High impact use cases, that is something that we work with you on identifying. We see that the ones that we're seeing now within life sciences have to do with anything to do with being able to manage like reports or real-time visibility within the supply chain, pharmacovigilance and call center handling, are on supply chain and quality. Those are the areas that we're seeing a lot of use cases in right now. But mainly what's happening is that the organization already knows what is causing pain and what is taking a lot more time and is very manual. And often we look at those first now and see if we can automate to relieve them. But I would say the high impact areas are complaint handling and pharmacovigilance, call center, and then supply chain management, and then reporting, and being able to basically automate your administrative processes within the organization. Jan,
I agree with Catherine, but the situation in healthcare, you may or may not be involved with this, but for instance, in some countries, there are a lot of intermediaries. So most hospitals in the US, for instance, over 96, 97% buy through what you call group purchasing organizations, or GPOs. And so you have these middlemen between the manufacturer and the hospital systems. And a lot of them, of course, take their cut. So it's a lot of cost, a lot of inefficiency, but based on a negotiated discount that the hospitals want. Now, that system is actually kind of disappearing, because what we have today is we have the ability to use bots to go cut past, short circuit all the middlemen and actually get almost a free market pricing. So supply chain is changing in healthcare. I think it behooves us to be aware of what's going on and to take advantage of the new direct access to information that we may get. And when you come to the time when you can negotiate virtually as a group of hospitals with a manufacturer, that's going to really give you great leverage. So I think just to stay aware, and, to watch and wait and to see what we can do with the supply chain. It's a topic of great concern right now. Yeah.
There's a specific question. Are the bots able to work with handwritten entries on PDF forms as opposed to typed entries?
Right. This is a very big area. Reading handwriting is extremely difficult. It can tell if there's a handwriting there. We have something called the IQ bot that is working to, it can read structured forms like web forms or faxed information or documents that are scanned in. But it's not, we're not there yet on handwriting. And I think that what we can tell is if something is, if a signature is in an area, but I think we need to, there's a lot of work to be done in really making handwriting work. And, but we're getting there. We're making some amazing advantages. It's incredible what we're able to do now. But I like to set expectations that it's not universal.
Yeah, the biggest challenge is if you have handwriting like a doctor's handwriting,
Yeah.
that is probably the biggest challenge of all. And if a pharmacist, and it's been shown, people have done studies, you know, pharmacists can't even read doctor's handwriting. If a pharmacist cannot read a doctor's handwriting, neither can a computer. So, but, you know, if you're using handwriting as a signature authentication, you can actually already do that digitally. So you don't need the handwriting for authentication. But if you have free text, let's say handwriting in a paper form that you need to capture, then you're going to have to use very advanced handwriting recognition and natural language processing. And I would say there are huge advances in that. There have been huge advances the last 2-3 years. So stay tuned. It's going to happen. Yeah.
Okay, and is your technology neutral across the various electronic health record software?
Yes, it is. It can access any electronic health record. You can extract and retrieve and insert data. The real question is, what is this software going to be allowed to do? For instance, we had one customer who wanted to insert reminders for physicians into the medical record on patients that were still pending as far as some kind of form or a review or something. And it was a very, very active area of discussion until they talked with the compliance department, and they saw a little bit of risk in terms of having an automated process right into the medical record, but that's not a technical issue. That's a policy issue. That's a risk issue. So technically we can do it, but we'll have to figure out if you're allowed to do it.
And we have a controversial question here. So while automation is going to be a new norm of the century, will it cause high employment? It's already happening worldwide, and if so, how do we address this?
This comes up quite a lot, and I think what we're seeing is, in fact, at organizations who've deployed automation, the job may change, but they're not looking, in life sciences companies, they actually are not looking to reduce jobs. They want to become more efficient at it. And so, yes, jobs will change. Some jobs might disappear. That's almost natural in the evolution of us adopting technology. You know, how many telephone operators do we have nowadays? You know, so things shift. And new jobs become made available. New ways of working become available. So I think it is the new norm and moving forward, but it's also a new opportunity for people to learn and democratize the skills associated with automation. This is something that anybody can learn to build. And I think it is,
This is something that actually is a really good issue, and is sort of the gorilla in the closet, you know, that when you mention it, people are concerned. But think of it as we are now in the 4th industrial revolution. And this has happened with every revolution we've had. So the question is, how do you prepare? And so if you automate, I would say prepare to reskill, to upskill your employees. And in fact, Harvard Business School did a really good study on what happens with organizations that automate and lay off people. It turns out they don't do as well as organizations that automate and use their people to do more productive things. That's where the return on investment is. The real return is the higher productivity and freeing up people to do that. So it's an exciting thing. It's something you really should think about in terms of your employees and workers. Yeah.
Right. Actually, one of the companies is deploying a digital worker as part of their HR strategy. So they're employing that as how are they going to have, what is the workforce of the future, and how would they enable their workforce to be able to take advantage of having digital assistants as part of their job, and also how do they reskill and move people into new areas. So they're actually incorporating that as part of their HR strategy. Really smart.
Yeah, the new org chart will have digital workers in it. So hopefully the human workers will be managing the digital workers, not the other way around, right? So, yeah.
And I guess on digital workers that you guys just mentioned, there's a related question on, sometimes employees are not keen to participate in automation projects. Again, worrying that they may have lost the job. So how do you get them to?
Yeah, we've seen that. Actually, what's really interesting is almost the as opposite has happened, where people really want to get rid of these tasks. We had a company that their employees who were doing the complaint handling were trying to figure out ways to not do all the manual entries, to actually, they wanted to solve problems and do the higher value interaction with the patients. And so they were advocates for this and wanted to bring it in. And a few of them went on to learn to build bots for this department. So for them, it was an advantage. One of the key things, though, is not to underestimate the need for change management. And that includes education, engaging people early, and really enabling them to understand what this means and bringing them along in the journey. And I think it's really important that you actually deploy the change management as part of it and bring the people along with you and help them understand the value of it so that you remove the fear and enable them to see the opportunity, or coach them on how this is benefiting for them. And literally, I've been in organizations where they sat there like this and looked at it, and in 10 minutes, they went, oh my God, you mean I don't have to do that report anymore? So the light does go on. And I think it's just engage people in the change management process.
Right, okay. So next question, as most of the country regulations are not ready or on pace for digital automation, so how can a private hospital move forward in this regard?
Yeah, so it depends on what the regulation is. I don't think there's regulation against using automation, but sometimes the regulation will say it has to be a human being doing that. And so then you'll need to actually educate the regulators to see what this does. If a machine does something, if you automate something on your behalf and it does exactly what you want it to do, it should not be an issue. But I know that regulations sometimes are slow to follow. And so I think the best thing is actually to introduce it to the regulatory bodies and the medical societies and so on, so they understand what it does and doesn't do. Again, it's like Catherine said, it's a matter of not knowing what it does, what it's supposed to do, and knowing that automation can be controlled by rules, very strictly governed, actually more secure than people, if you think about it, should help to solve some of those fears.
And that's where we're here to help. So
Yeah.
we'll walk with you on this journey and enable those best practices to be shared with you.
Yeah, a related question on data security. So this person asks, how secure will the protected health information data is through intelligent automation?
Well, it's the basic security configuration for our product is actually meets or exceeds all. It's the top of the line in terms of industry security. So the question is, how do you protect it? How do you govern it? And if you think about it, automation actually takes the major cause of security breaches away, which is human beings who have to handle and transfer data and have unauthorized access to data. So if you think about security, not only is the system more secure and more monitoring happens, but also you can use bots to monitor what's happening in the hospital. For instance, every bot that we have can monitor who's doing what permission they have, what they did, the decisions they made, and what the outcomes were. If you put that bot anywhere in your system, you put those bots in there to monitor, you can actually have a very granular, very detailed map of what's happening in your organization. And today, no healthcare organization can do that, so you have a lot of risk. So I would say automation, it can be used for good, can be used for bad, just like any technology. But if you think about it carefully, it can really take away a lot of those headaches.
What are the AI capabilities that are included in this tool?
So we have computer vision, where we can recognize faxes and so on and so forth. We have fuzzy logic, which is another form of AI. It can do fuzzy matching of information, so it can make very good guesses as far as what patient you're talking about. It also has natural language processing, which is a way to interpret, I would say, unstructured text data and structure it so you understand what the text is about. In an electronic health record, about 80 to 90% of the data is unstructured. It's doctor's notes that are free text. And if you can't look into that text, you lose a lot of information. And studies have done that. In fact, I have a friend who did a research study looking at the way that people interpret electronic health record based on just the structured fields. And it turns out that you cannot. It's very unreliable. So you have to look into nurses' notes, doctors' notes, things like that. And finally, our product has machine learning, which is really, really interesting. It can actually learn from repeated training data and from repeated experience. So actually your investment increases in value over time, which is something that very few technologies do. That is, you invest and your accuracy goes higher and higher over time. And so we have those situations. On top of that, we also work with, as I mentioned, a lot of different partners and best of breed partners who have the best NLP engines, the best AI engines. So all that can be integrated very easily.
Yeah. And we showed a couple examples earlier of how we do work with AI partners. In addition, the way that our A2019, which is a native cloud platform, it incorporates the ability to add Python script and other tools within your bot itself. So it really is a nice complement for those who want to include machine learning or write a Python script or something like that within their bot. It can be incorporated very easily, like drop and drag and write. So it's intended to make it very easy for developers or data scientists and others to actually take advantage of the power of AI without having to be an AI expert. So it's got a lot of.
We also want to add. I want to add a little bit. We have a package called Bot Insights, and that's our analytics package. And most other vendors, you need to add that on, a third-party add-on, but it's built in. So we have both operational and business insights generated, and that can give you the kind of information you need to start doing predictive analytics and things like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, somebody asked, what is the probability of errors with all of these and automation?
It's interesting that somebody actually, when I was presenting a couple of months ago, and a doctor was in the audience, said, "How can you achieve 100% accuracy?" and I said I was skeptical too, but what I found out is that it depends on the process. If you have a very well-defined process, you understand all the exceptions, all the places where it could fail. If you can define that, you actually can reach 100% accuracy. It's just a repetitive task, so. Yeah, it can be as accurate as you can understand the process to be. Yeah.
And one thing that is you can embed in there is what happens with an error.
Mm-hmm.
So in fact, if something isn't accurate or something doesn't read right, you have exception handling. So that exception can be fed to an individual. So then some specialist or a person can actually take a look at it and figure out what's going on. So in fact, not only is it able to be 100% accurate, it also has the ability to handle any of the errors or any of the discrepancies.
The last two questions. Okay, so moving slightly beyond healthcare, so EXL, someone from EXL service asks, are these concepts replicable in insurance as well?
Yeah, I think some of the use cases I think are like contact center and automated response to customer inquiries, for instance, are very transferable. But in most cases, in our experience, each situation has its own unique characteristics and will require the work of process discovery and process design. So this assumes that your organization already has a well understood process or documented processes, assumes that they know what the pain points are, and also that you can measure what these processes, how they perform. That's actually very important, because if you don't have that, you won't be able to tell how useful or how profitable the automation is. So when you have those things in place, then you have to go through the process of discovering how to automate that. And that's something we can help you with. But yeah, I think many of these concepts are replicable or transferable into insurance. Yeah.
yeah, the last question to sort of allow the audience member to take away with. So how do these leading organizations scale? Where do they scale, and what are the lessons, key lessons that they have learned?
I think scaling, many of the organizations in terms of automation, we found that many organizations look at processes that are highly transactional, very repetitive. So for instance, in a health insurer, claims processing, it's a big pain, a lot of transactions, very high volume, a lot of repetitive work, a lot of rules-based decisions that, to be honest, bots can do much better. And so when you think about the size of the problem, that's where you want to focus first, probably. But scalability is also an analysis of what parts of the organization may fail if you have sudden demand, or either up or down demand, like we're seeing with COVID-19 today. So it's not just those transactions, it's also the transactions that are at risk, like supply chain, like telemedicine management, things like that. So scalability is different things to different people, but you think about scalability allowing you to be resilient and to survive all these disruptions. I think that's where you get started.
Yeah, just to add to that, absolutely. I think that there is a bit of a process. People tend to start small in a known area, get early success with a pilot. Then they actually engage the business units. They need to be able to be business driven. So they are empowering the business units to deploy automation. And in that process, they set up a governance structure associated with a center of excellence, or some sort of a group that helps to decide what the compliance guidelines are, what the how the rules of actually building a bot, and also what are the quality standards, et cetera. And they'll often create innovation pipelines or others to work with the Center of Excellence or their group that builds the bots for them. They may in fact scale with a partner to enable them to rapidly discover and process, map out what they're going to automate, and be able to build those bots quickly. In that same process, they do things like we run workshops with them around the world and help to evangelize as well as educate. We do things like botathons, which is where people get together and build bots, or we do build-a-bot sessions where we teach people how to build bots, so that gives them that experience and really ignites their imagination. And so through that, it generates a lot of demand. And then through their organization, they learn how to create models to serve that demand, either on self-service for simple bots that the people can build themselves, to more complex partner-enabled bots and process automation. So, and as they get more institutional knowledge, they get faster at building these bots. So they'll go from, like I showed earlier, 1 to 5 bots to 15 bots a month to build. And there's an organization that's done thousands of process automation. So, so we can help you with that journey.
In fact, I think we're the only company that has scaled to that level. Yeah. So you find something that can automate, that needs to be automated, at several thousand bots. Imagine the control structure you need to have in place, the kind of robustness of the security and the governance. We have that, and so that's thinking about the future as far as scalability and preparing for these unforeseen circumstances is very important.
Yeah, and the ability that we have, the A2019 native cloud system, enables us to start quickly and operate service quickly across the organization. So it does enable rapid scaling, and so we've seen it. Life sciences companies have gone from very simple to quite expansive, and we're seeing that across the world. So it's very exciting to see that people really get relieved during these times.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So thank you both for the wonderful presentation. Do you guys have anything else to add before we conclude the webinar?
The only thing I'd like to add is, if you've got more questions, I know we might not have answered them, please feel free to reach out and connect with us, connect with your Automation Anywhere team here in the region. And we're here to work with you, and we're available to answer more questions and provide consultation or discovery, or be able to chat with you more in greater detail. We welcome the opportunity.
And I would echo that. Please feel free to reach out. And feel free to connect on LinkedIn to either one of us if you're interested. we would love to talk with you about, I know some more questions just came in, but since we're at time, in terms of time, please feel free to reach out.
All right, thank you all for attending this webinar. So kindly help us to fill out the post-webinar survey, which will help us to help us at Automation Anywhere to improve future webinars. All right, thank you everyone.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Stay.